Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Landlording Show. This is the show where we go over how to run your investment properties and make them as stress-free as possible, as profitable as possible, and make sure your investments don't turn into nightmares. I'm your host, Tim Harstead. We are a property management company that manages just about 300 units on the south side of Chicago. So that is where we get our experience and our expertise from, doing it day in, day out, dealing with all the things that you as a landlord may be dealing with in C and D class areas. We also manage in A and B class areas as well, but that's really where we get a lot of experience and get a lot of issues that we have to deal with day in and day out. So if you are looking for information on how to better run your investment properties, this is the show for you. On today's episode, I'm going to do a Q&A. We're going to go and take some questions that we got off of Facebook groups that we are in and answer them. The caveat to all of this is I'm always going to tell you, always check with your attorney before doing anything. Every city is different. Every village is different. Every situation is slightly different. So I'm going to give you a general idea of how we would handle things, but it is important to consult your attorney. It is important to have a team when you are trying to run a company. And yes, your investment property is a company, especially if you're doing it properly and putting it into an LLC to help yourself stay away from having issues legally and financially. You are running a company, whether it's a single family home or a 100-unit building or complex. Running a company is a huge way to see your benefits go up and see your progress move forward. Now, just to address, I do want to apologize for all those that have missed us. We've been gone for about a month. Unfortunately, I lost my voice early on in December. With whatever has been going around, that's not COVID, not the flu. You test negative for everything, but you just feel like hell. So to anyone else that got anything like that, I wish you a speedy recovery. And I went about 2 weeks losing my voice, and then the holidays hit, and we just, time flies by. So we are back now, and my promise to you is to get back to being consistent. So let's go ahead and jump on in with the questions that I pulled from the internet. These are questions that no one asked us to answer, but we're going to answer anyways because I think more people should see these answers and know what's going on. The first question we got is from someone with a building with an older boiler radiator system. He says that the apartment is around 70 degrees, but the tenant's complaining that it isn't working. I'm checking out the radiator, but I'm afraid it's just the nature of the system. At what point do I have to supply space heaters? So I want to break this down in a couple of ways. First off, is the apartment actually 70, or does the tenant want it to be 75, but it's 70? So at least in Chicago, the rule is at night it has to be 70 degrees. During the day, it has to be 68 degrees in the apartment. So, sorry, I got that backwards. During the day, 70, at night, 68 in the apartment. So with that being said, take a thermostat, take something that you can go and measure the air and just see what her apartment is at. Now, if this is a multi-unit building and two apartments are at 70, but her apartment's not, you may have some issue with the radiators and not the boilers. So that's something to look into. If it's just one room that is cold, it may be looking at moving things around and maybe ways to sort of supplement and figure out how that is. Now, with that being said, have we had where tenants complain that the heat won't go up to 80? Yes, absolutely. And that is something you just have to explain. Hey, we keep the heat at 70 degrees. It's not meant to go above that, and it shouldn't go below that. If it goes below 68, call us. We'll get someone there right away. We'll get it fixed. The second thing I want to touch base on, though, is you said it's just the nature of the boiler. Now, if your boiler is actually not heating the place up, let's say it only gets up to 65 in that unit, then you have an issue with the boiler or the radiators that needs to be fixed. And this is something that's serious. The fines from most cities, if you are in a northern state, is going to be pretty hefty. Not to mention, if you're in Chicago and that tenant starts calling 311 to say, hey, my heat's not working, you're looking at a ton of building violations because they're going to bring everyone out to look at it. And even if the heat's working, they'll probably find something just because they're out there and they're inspecting the property, and they're going to find a little thing to mark you on and try to fine you on, because that's just the nature of Chicago. So we don't want to be in that situation. So take care of the tenant. Go to the tenant, make sure that you have some way to read what the heat in their unit is. A lot of boilers only have one thermostat, and let's say that the thermostat's in unit 1, but she's in unit 2. You might be much warmer in unit 1 than unit 2, and we got to solve that problem, whether it's insulating unit 2, whether it's fixing the radiators, or finding out what's going on. All those things can make a huge difference. On to question number 2. I have a tenant that's breaking his lease, and he's only in the 6-month of a 12-month lease. He's been there 18 total months, so it was a renewal. Is it safe to assume he never cleaned, cooked heavily with oil, maybe fried foods? He has a dog, and it's just a mess. Few broken window locks, almost all light bulbs burnt out. Maybe more is going along. I've never seen a unit left this way. Luckily, he was able to find a new tenant, but the unit is looking awful. I've always cleaned units myself. And he's basically just wants to know if there's anything he can do for the condition. So I'm gonna touch on a couple different points. One, this really comes down to the way that you wrote your lease originally. So a lot of landlords, unfortunately, they look for solutions when the problem happens, but they're not prepared for the problem to happen. And unfortunately, you need to be prepared for the problems to happen. So when you have your lease written, make sure that you have something in the lease that discusses what is expected of the tenant. You expect the tenant to leave the property in broom swept condition when they leave. You expect the lights, in this case, the light bulbs to be in order. Otherwise, you're going to, take money from them, or take money from either their security deposit or bill them later for the fixes. So that's part one. Is your lease written in a way that you can recoup these costs? Because if not, you're not really going to have a basis for it. Unfortunately, light bulbs are, it's normal wear and tear for them to go out. It's nothing that the tenant did. So you don't really have recourse unless in your lease it says, hey, when you leave, you need to replace the light bulb. Any non-working light bulbs, you must have working light bulbs. So that's something that you can put in your lease. Lease break fees you can have in your lease. So that way you can charge them when they break the lease. Technically, when they have a lease, at least in Chicago, again, always check with your attorneys. Depending on where you are, everything's in a difference. If you're in Chicago and you have a 12-month lease when they leave early, they are technically have to pay the rent up until the point you find a new tenant. So if it took you 3 weeks to find a tenant, then they should pay you 3 weeks of rent. You can add that on and then have a collection agency go after them. Odds are a lot of these times you're not going to get the money, just because if they left because they couldn't pay the money, or if they left because something is going on, it's going to be very hard to get the money, but it's worth sending it to collections, see if they can find it. But again, if you have your lease written out in a way that allows them to break it when emergencies happen, and you say, hey, pay me 2 months rent, I'm going to let you go out of your lease. A lot of tenants will do that. When they feel trapped and feel like they can't get out, there's no way they can pay 6 months of rent, they are having a medical emergency or they have a family emergency they have to go to, they're just going to leave because that's really the best choice for them. So if you give more options and give them ways to do it, you're going to be able to help out. Now, the last part about this it's not part of the question, but just some advice. If you have an apartment that looks terrible and you're trying to show that apartment before you turn it to the two prospective tenants, and a tenant's taking it, I would double check that tenant, because it sounds like that tenant is desperate. If they're taking a place that has broken windows, has, no lights, is dirty, it smells like dog, all that stuff, they're pretty desperate if they're picking that apartment. I'm just going to throw it out there. We personally make sure our units are almost all the way turned before we start showing them, or at least in good enough condition where nothing is going to change the actual way it looks. There might be a couple tweaks here or there, but when someone walks through it pretty quickly, they're not going to notice anything. That's going to attract better tenants. It's going to make sure that your apartment is ready, because when you have a tenant start off on a bad foot of a unit not being properly turned in time, it really just adds to it. They're going to start having more and more issues that they report because they're looking for it, because they saw that stuff was broken. And when they saw stuff broken, they knew that to look for more and make sure everything is okay. So, if your lease doesn't have a buyout clause yet, if your lease doesn't have a clause for how you expect them to return the unit to you, I would highly advise get with your attorney, make sure that your lease is written correctly and has all these things in there, and that will help immensely. Next time this happens to you. All right, got someone who bought a building. He's asking, do you determine the monthly rental rate at 1% of the value of the home? So no, you don't determine. I mean, you do pick the monthly rental rate, but you can't control the market and you can't determine the market. Now, where you're getting that 1% the value of the home from is going to tell you if you're buying a good property. So when you are buying a property, you should be looking at the rent amount that you think you can get for the property. So run comps, which, to answer the second part of that question, is to actually determine your rent, you need to go ahead and find other rentals that are similar within a half mile, maybe a mile if you're in an area where everything's spread out from you. Find similar properties that have rented and compare those prices and what they were able to get, and that's going to dictate what you can get. Now, that 1% rule is before you buy the property. Let's say that you can only get $1,000 in rent, then you don't want to pay more than $100,000 for that property, because that is the 1% rule. Now, I will say this, in today's market, it is getting almost impossible to find properties that will qualify if you're trying to use that rule as your underwriting. So a lot of investors are going away from that just because the way the market is, it is extremely hard to find right now. So people are giving up on that, but that is what the rule used to be. I'm sure it will be adjusted, and new gurus will start to say new rules, whether it's 2% rule or whatever, but you can't work backwards. You can't make an apartment worth more than the market dictates. So whatever the market dictates is what you're going to be able to get for rent. And depending on the season and all that, you might even get less than what you think the market has for you. So, it's very good you want to underwrite before you buy. You're not going to be able to charge whatever you want and have a tenant. Otherwise, you are going to be sitting vacant for a very long time and losing money every month. I got another one about the new laws in 2024 in Illinois. So this is specifically for people in Illinois that are listening. There's a new law that says you cannot force tenants to pay electronically. What this means is if, little 70-year-old lady does not know how to go online and pay online, you cannot make that the only way they pay. You can make that an option, and you should, because it makes life a lot easier. But you also have to have an option for them to mail you a check or drop off cash or do something that does not require a computer or a smartphone. So that is the new law. Do with that what you may, whether that's collecting rent manually, which I don't advise. I would advise having some kind of program or somewhere. We have our office that they can mail checks to. We also have a program called Pay Near Me, which allows them to go to Walmart, 7-Eleven, CVS, and pay via cash through there. So all those are some possibilities that you can do to have them pay non-electronically and make sure you don't get in trouble in Illinois. Those that have been through a recent eviction, how long did it take from the time you get in the first 5-day notice? So recently, the way that the evictions, just really quickly, because we talk about this a lot, but from the 5 days, you wait 5 days, and you give the 5-day notice to your attorney and say, hey, go ahead and file in court. From that starting point, you're looking at about 6 to 8 months to get the court to give you the writ of possession. And then you're looking at about another 30 to 60 days for the sheriffs to come out and actually do the eviction for you. So 7 to 9 months right now. With that being said, a lot of cases are going through the process of negotiations, and you might be able to get your tenant out cash for keys earlier than that. You might also be able to get them on a court-appointed payment plan, which then once they miss a payment will allow them to be give you writ of possession much faster than going through the entire trial. So say in month 1, you go to court, the tenant shows up, you make a deal. Hey, if you make your payments every month, I won't evict you. And they miss that payment on month 2. Now you can go and get your writ. And that's only 3 months, and now you're in line for the sheriff. So that eviction is going to take 3 to 5 months. Or best case scenario, they're paying and you eventually get caught up with everything. But that's best case. If it's going through the entire eviction, you have to go through court. You have to go through an actual trial. You're looking at, again, 6-7 months at a minimum from the time you file to get them out. All right, here's a good question. Closed back porch, can this count as a bedroom with applicable closets? So a couple of things. One, it needs to be heated. It needs to be heated the same way as the rest of the house. So it can't just be like, oh, we have a plugged-in space heater here, so it's fine. If the furnace goes out there, it's insulated, it's good, you should be okay. It has to have an egress. It has to have windows, a window, a closet, all have to be in there. The last one that I have seen the city coming right up that they will not allow it to be a bedroom is if the second exit is through that bedroom. So if your back porch is off your kitchen, let's say, and your second exit is through that back porch, you cannot turn that into a bedroom, because then if the person in the bedroom has their door locked and a fire happens in the front of the house, people cannot get out the back of the house because that exit is locked because it's a bedroom. So that is the other way that it's not allowed. Otherwise, if it's a finished part of the home, it definitely can work. All right, guys. So that is this episode. We're going to start doing some questions and answers more often, maybe once every couple episodes. So if you have questions, feel free to comment them below. Let us know. Find us on Facebook. Find us on Instagram. We're all over TikTok, The Landlording Show. Find us, ask us questions, DM us, and we'd be happy to answer them on one of our upcoming shows and give you any advice, obviously through DM and stuff as well. So thanks for listening. Hope you guys come back to the next episode. We will all talk soon.